of the Library. This is a cooperative thing that we do with the library, the Friends of the Library, Sierra College Press, and associated students. I've got just a couple of slides to show you here. We started this intellectual salon series a number of years ago, and we've taken these four-letter words and we decided that we'd dissect them and learn as much as we can about them, looking at them all in an interdisciplinary fashion and engaging students and participants with different ways to look at these different topics. We've really had some fun, especially starting with time. We moved on into love. We moved to fear. Notice we're sticking with four-letter words here that we can at least discuss. And then home was our last one that ended up going for 3 semesters because there's so many different ways to look at this. This year we've landed on a very, very important four-letter word called hope, and not like we need it at all, but this is a very, very important component for all of us. We live in a world with a lot more people. I was just checking the other day to see how many people were on this planet when I was born, and it was just over 2 billion. Well, it's 7.6 billion people now. We're all trying to share the same thing. We all have more technology, and a lot of that is not favorable to life and future and human beings and so on. So that's why we're discussing hope in many different ways. And I'll introduce our speaker here today. Upcoming events on November the 13th. Did you know that Sierra College students here have started an international business with sustainable chocolate making in 6 or 7 different countries? That'll be our next salon on Wednesday, November the 13th. And then December, while you're studying for finals and so on, in the early part of the month, we'll have all kinds of music in here about music that represents hope. I mean, can you think of a tune that reminds you of hope? John Lennon's Imagine and things like that. Lots of good music. So those are our salons. And I am a biologist, retired biologist. I'd like to say that I'm a tree-hugging dirt worshiper from way back. I have grandsons and a granddaughter that are extremely important to me. And so I love to seek out people that are working on solutions for the problems, especially those which we have created. If we created the problem, then we can invent ways to get rid of that problem. And that's what this series is all about. But I'd really like you to write this down and go to the Goldman Prize. It's quite simple, goldmanprize.org. Now, this is more of an environmental prize all the way around the world, where people are working on solutions to the most important ecological and environmental problems that we face in the world today. But you can also go online and find out who's working on hunger, who's working on inequality, and let's face it, there's a lot more people working on it than you really think if you just go out there and have a look. Unfortunately, the people that are working against us, so many of them are in office and high offices and so on. So it's very important for them to hear you and us regularly about changes that desperately need to be made. Who is this young lady? Greta, right? Yeah, very, very important young lady from Sweden, who don't take no guff from nobody, right, if you've heard her presentations and so on. And so this is a real inspirational young lady with a very, very important message, and you're going to hear more of that today. So I'll introduce our speaker, or speakers. I don't know if Kara's going to speak at all today, but I'll introduce first Lizzie Moore, right here, who is taking time off from her job, as well as Karen Sutter. You can stand up and they can see who you are. They've given up a part of their day to come in and share with you about 350placer.org, and I'll let them fill you in the blanks. But most importantly, for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, and all of our futures, for wonderful and beautiful, peaceful Earth, we desperately need solutions. And that's what this whole series is all about, and that's what today's presentation is about. So don't forget to leave me what your hopes are. Populate our tree with sticky leaves, and everyone gets to read it after that. So with that, let's welcome Lizzie Moore from 350 Plastic. I will go to your slideshow right now.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, hi everybody, my name's Lizzie. I'm a climate activist, among other things, and I'm from 350 Placer. Before I get started with anything, I want to let you know the assumptions that I'm working on. We talked with Joe about this. So you know what I'm resting on, and if you want to talk about the things that we're not going to talk about, you can invite 350 Placer back for another presentation. But first of all, we're assuming that everybody in here believes, or is willing to do so for the next hour and a half, that climate change is happening and that it's human caused. And that also people are relatively familiar with some of the implications that climate change has. So I'm not going to be talking about the science of climate change or trying to convince everyone. Again, if you want to hear that kind of a presentation, we're available for that as well, but just getting that out of the way. So the title of my presentation is Putting Hope in Its Rightful Place, Practical, Philosophical, and Emotional Solutions for Climate Change. Because I think hope is really important, and I also think that we have to be really careful about when and how that we use it in our lives. So before I go any further, I want to tell you about 350 Placer. So 350 Placer is a local chapter of the international grassroots organization called 350.org. Have you guys heard about it? Raise your hand if you've heard about 350. Okay, so 350, for those of you who don't know, is the parts per million of carbon that's thought to be safe and sustainable for life on our planet. And we consistently measure at this point over 410 parts per million. So the whole point of 350.org and 350 Placer is to get carbon levels back down to, it's basically like 1992, like back to carbon levels from a while ago. So so we're a group of locals, and that we started the local chapter in about 2017. The kinds of activities that we do, we went to the recent climate strike. We do presentations, educational presentations. This year we're going to want to work with people to create your own presentations. So if you're interested in speaking about climate change, there is a sign-up sheet over here. You can sign up for the email. You can also write a little note like, I want to learn how to give a climate change presentation, and we can help you to do that. We have climate change trivia night, so we call it Hot Climate Cold Beer. It's at a local brewing company. We do tabling and parades and educational events, and we're basically just trying to get out there. And so, again, if you have any questions, you can talk to me after, sign up here, and then there's also a handout that says about what 350 means if you want to go out and talk about it in the world, because it's really important that we know that it's a scientific number, 350, right? Okay, so as many of you may know, in October of 2018, the IPCC, which is an international group of climate scientists, basically said that we have 12 years to reverse our course and to prevent catastrophic consequences of climate change. And then about a month later, the US government put out a similar report. And I want to be really clear, a lot of times people think, okay, in 12 years, life ends, and that's it. That's not what it is. Cruise ships are really environmentally unfriendly, so I hate using this example, but I actually think it's really good. So cruise ships are big, and they're really hard to turn around. So if we're a cruise ship, like all humans on the planet, we're a cruise ship, we're heading this way, we have 12 years, and now it's more like 10 years, because this was in 2018, right? We have 10 years now to actually be able to turn ourselves around. We don't have to be back to port where we started. We just have to be turned around to prevent these catastrophic things that we all fear and don't want to happen. So that's the base that we're going on, is that it's not just that we need to take action, we need to take action now. And it's like all hands on deck, we all have to step up and do our part. And by the way, So what Joe said is that my role here is I'm supposed to be a provocateur, which I've never owned that title before. And this is supposed to be interactive. So I kind of designed this not to be just me talking. So if somebody has a question or a thought, this isn't like a wait until after I'm done talking to answer questions. I would like you to raise your hands, talk. If we get too far off into the weeds, I'll bring us back because I do have a lot to cover. So please interrupt me. I really don't want to be the only one talking for an hour and 20 minutes. And I don't think you guys want me to either. So, okay. So the first thing is that we've got to look this in the eye. We can't turn away. We can't be the ostrich with our head in the sand. And it would be so easy to do that because it feels really overwhelming. A lot of us don't know what to do. We're all busy. And so, you know, even using like excuses as, you know, I'm meditating. No, it's not going to work. We got to face this. So I want to talk about hope. And when I designed this, I'm not just going to tell you why I'm hopeful. I designed this to really talk about like the intellectual components behind hope. And I actually was talking to Kara when I came, and I was like, you know what? I forgot to add into the presentation to tell everyone why I'm hopeful about things. Like I completely left that out because I was so focused on talking about hope and other mental tools that we have to build ourselves up and keep ourselves going, especially in such a big fight. So let's talk. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to back up, and I want to talk. This is intellectual. There's a term, and it was Horst Riddle is the guy who coined the phrase "wicked problem." And he did his work in the late 60s and then published papers in the early 1970s. And wicked problem, like starvation is a wicked problem. You know, food distribution, human trafficking, like the really big problems in the world is a wicked problem. And I'm going to just read a few things to you because I really want you to take it in because climate change is a wicked problem. And it's important to understand what we're working with in order to get to the business of solving it. So, the idea is that a wicked problem is one that's so complex that people can't even agree on the problem, let alone the solution. And I don't just mean in our country, people who say that climate change isn't real. I don't, because we're actually an anomaly. We're like the only Western industrialized nation whose right and left wing politicians don't agree that it's a problem and that it's human caused. What people disagree with is how to solve it. Should the government be involved? Should industry be involved? Should the individual be responsible? And you know, my thing is that it's probably not one, but it's many things. And that there's multiple stakeholders, and that the problem is moving in time because it's not like, okay, it's October 24th, or is it October 24th, 2019, so the problems that exist today are not going to be the same as the problems that exist tomorrow, and sometimes there'll be fewer problems, and sometimes there'll be more problems, so like it's a moving part. But I want to get into it even a little more because it can help us frame our solutions. So wicked problems have no definitive formulation. The problem of poverty in Texas is grossly similar but discreetly different from poverty in Nairobi. So no practical characteristics describe poverty. It's hard, maybe impossible, to measure or claim success with wicked problems because they bleed into one another, unlike the boundaries of traditional design problems that can be articulated or defined. Solutions to wicked problems can only be good or bad, not true or false. And I would say that solutions are more like, this is the best choice. It's not a great choice, it's not a perfect choice, but this is the best choice for now because they're so complex. There's no idealized end state to arrive at, so approaches to wicked problems should be tractable ways to improve a situation rather than solve it. There's no template to follow. It's a new problem, so there's nothing to base it on. Although history may be a guide. Teams that approach wicked problems must literally make things up as they go along, and there's always more than one explanation for a wicked problem, with the appropriateness of the explanation depending greatly on the individual perspective of the designer. And every wicked problem is a symptom of another problem. So think about inequality, political instability, death, disease, famine. Those are all wicked, and they can't really be fixed, but you can work on them. And also that approaches to the solutions require multidisciplinary teams. You have to have people from all walks of life contributing to the solution. And so that's what we have. We have a wicked problem. That's what climate change is. Where did I put the clicker? Here it is. So I worked with a man who worked in the area of wicked problems for about 3 years. And a little bit later in the conversation, I'm going to get back to this and kind of bring it around full circle for you. Okay. So in talking about basically a very, very complex, multifaceted, moving situation, I want to talk a little bit about just how messy life is. And again, this is sort of laying the foundation for what we're working with. The idea of a wicked problem is that there's no silver bullet. So I put the Coors Light can in there because I think the only silver bullet is the Coors Light can. I thought that was funny. You guys you don't have to laugh. That's okay. I thought it was funny. So it's the idea Voltaire said, the perfect is the enemy of the good. So again, there's not going to be a perfect one solution that's going to change it all. It's like the problems in our country right now. You know, people will say, oh, it's this. It's gerrymandering. It's that. It's that. It's not any one thing. It's multiple things coming from different points of view. There's also an amazing, if you guys are into politics, which I would have to say, unfortunately, climate change is a political issue. It seems ridiculous that it has to be, but it is. It's called pantsuit politics, and it really focuses on the nuance of every situation. So it's basically the gray area, and it's understanding that we don't have to have our jerseys on. We can be many things in many different situations, and we can still all work on the same problems. So I like changing my thinking to everything being nuanced, because again, it helps us be a little bit less reactionary, more productive, more effective, that sort of thing. The other thing is that when working with climate change, we have to embrace our inner hypocrite. I think the fashion industry is makes a huge impact on climate change. I bought these new boots about 2 weeks ago. I feel extremely guilty, but I did it. Like I'm a hypocrite, and yet I have solar panels. You know, I have an electric vehicle. I'm a climate activist. I speak. Like we all do things wrong, quote unquote wrong. And that's okay. We have to accept that we are both contributing to the problem of climate change, and we also can be a part of the solution. If you think that you have to be perfect before you can take action, we're going to have a big problem, because none of us are going to be perfect, because I have a slide coming up that I'll get into that more, but we live in this world, and it's impossible to not contribute negatively to our environment while we're living in it. So that's another thing to sort of frame this conversation. So in the idea that life is messy and nuanced and complex, in regards to hope, I'm going to suggest it's the concept of duality, that we need to release all hope while also holding on to it and embracing it fully. That we can do both. It's not either be hopeful or hopeless. It's to be hopeful and then to let go of hope at the same time, and I'm going to go into what I mean about that. I have a friend, her name's Shannon Curtis, and she created an album a couple years ago that was all about that. I can be an introvert and an extrovert at the same time. I can be sad and happy. I can be fearful, I can be faithful. We all are capable as human beings of having opposing feelings, opposing viewpoints, and that's really what makes us human. So first I want to talk about how hope helps. And I'm going to read this, but a personal non-slideshow. So this morning, my family and friends live in Santa Rosa. So I had two of my people this morning evacuated because another wildfire has started. And so I'm on the phone, I'm making sure that, that they're evacuating. It's obviously scary for everyone. It's totally like post-traumatic stress from the fires in 2017 that was, completely devastating. And I'm getting ready to come do this presentation, and I'm thinking to myself, well, we just have to hope that everything's okay. And I was like, I absolutely, positively need hope to allow myself to function and not like crumble with, you know, whether it's remembering about last time or worrying about this time or, you know. And so I also this week had a friend whose close family member was diagnosed with a really, really serious cancer. And it's like, hope, I was observing her experience, and hope is what's underlying all the actions that they're taking. So it's really important, and I don't know where that statement really belongs in this, but I wanted to say it because it just happened like this morning. I was like, wow, I am really hopeful right now that everything's going to work out. So this is from The Guardian in 2016, and I'm gonna read this, and this is about how important hope is. For many of us, myself included some days, the desperate state of our environment leaves us numb with sadness and frankly lost in hopelessness. We don't act because we don't know what to do. We don't act because there's only so much negativity we can swallow before we throw up our hands and go back to playing Pokemon Go. Without any dose of hope, we feel ourselves succumbing to despair. So this is an example, like I just gave you, in a personal situation happening in my life right now, where like we really need hope to keep going. And then psychologists also, there's so much research you guys could look up about hope. And this is, I love this. Have you ever met a happy, hopeless person? I don't think I have. Like, ever since I read that, I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I have, you know? So the reason why I want you to let go of hope is I want you to let go of the idea that somebody's coming to save us. One of my teachers and mentors, Debbie Ford, she coined this in one of the chapters of one of her books. And, you know, a lot of times in a lot of different instances in our life, we have the idea that the knight in shining armor is going to gallop on his stallion over the hill and sweep us up like Snow White and kiss us and wake us up from a dream, or, you know, whatever. And with climate change, no one is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. Yes, our elected officials have to do their job, but we have to step up. So when I talk about letting go of hope, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Hope without action behind it is not going to be effective for us as a species to keep ourselves going. And then I wanted to get into a little bit of a Buddhist thought. So Buddhism would say that hope is just taking you away from the present moment and preventing you from actually accepting what is and dealing with the reality of things. So the last little part of this says, but on the other hand, hope is something that drags your attention away from the present. It encourages you to spend your time dreaming rather than living in the here and now. It obscures your clarity of vision. So I don't know what the difference is in thinking about this. And this is the other thing. I'm not an expert on this. I've been thinking about it, but I don't know. So when I say I want this to be interactive, please feel free to raise your hands and chime in. I totally agree that hope takes you away from the present moment, and yet I used it this morning hoping that, my family's houses wouldn't burn down and that they would be safe. And so I don't know, it's a balance, it's a nuance, it's complex. And Greta Thunberg herself says that she doesn't want hope. I'm going to read this whole thing because it's important. So she says, adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day, and then I want you to act. I want you to act as if your house is on fire, because it is. So even Greta herself is saying, hope is not going to be effective here. We need action. The last thing that I wanted to present to you, Betty's here, and she recommended this book to me, but the type of thing when you hear the same thing like every day for like 3 days, when Betty was like, oh, have you heard about the book Active Hope? I was like, yes, I have. This is like the 5th time I've heard about this book in the last week. So it kind of, it highlights what I've been talking about, that hope shouldn't be an excuse not to act. And what Joanna Macy says is, well, actually, this is a description of the book. At the heart of this book is the idea that active hope is something we do rather than have. It involves being clear what we hope for and then playing our role in the process of bringing that about. the journey of finding and offering our unique contribution to the great turning, which is a phase of our evolution that she's saying is coming, which basically means that we're all coming together to create a sustainable world. Helps us to discover new strengths, open to a wider network of allies, and experience a deepening of our aliveness. When our responses are guided by the intention to act for the healing of our world, the mess we're in not only becomes easier to face, our lives also become more meaningful and satisfying. And I'm about halfway through the book because it was just recently recommended to me, but I thought that that really played on the idea of using hope, but not relying on it as our only solution to the problem. The other thing in a conversation I have is like, well, I don't really think hope is the right word. I think it's optimism, or I think you really need to believe. And I think, you know, labels are sometimes really important, and sometimes people are pretty upset about being labeled. And so I think take whatever word, whatever word you need to have, it's having an underlying mental and emotional state that keeps you going while you're taking action and while you're dealing with fear. So anyway, said, you know, what's in a label? So does anybody have anything that they want to ask Betty?
I'd add commitment.
Commitment, okay, great. Okay. So back to the Buddhist point of view, there's another Buddhist point of view that basically talks that hope, in a sense, is a decision. So when we change our inner determination, everything begins to move in a new direction. The moment that we make a powerful resolve, every nerve and fiber in our being will immediately orient itself toward the fulfillment of this goal or desire. On the other hand, if we think this is never going to work out, then every cell in our body will be deflated and give up the fight. Hope, in a sense, is a decision. It is the most important decision we can make. Hope changes everything, starting with our lives. Hope is the force that enables us to take action and make our dreams come true. It has the power to change winter into summer, bareness into creativity, agony to joy. So I would say that even though Greta says that she doesn't want hope, I would say that she is very hopeful. And of course, I can't speak to what's going on in her own mind and her own mental state. But I would say that as a human being, I don't think that she could be making the impact that she's making in the world without hoping that things are going to get better and that we're going to make change. So I added this, I found this graphic, obviously, online, and then I put this little green bar in because I was like, I think she's resting on hope. I think she's standing on hope. And I think hope can be like a tool in our toolbox. It's something we need to keep in our back pocket, but it shouldn't be like, you know, our body or like our major garment of clothing, because it's sort of like saying, you know, I'm going to pray for something. I think that prayer can be very powerful and very helpful, but I think that in some circumstances it's a nice addition, but I don't think that it's necessarily going to give us what we need, the results that we need. Okay. So we're on to the second part of the presentation, which is the actual solutions that we can get into. So before I do that, does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share, questions, dialogue? Like, this is really supposed to be interactive.
I believe hope is like a seed that you plant with a good soul and just start. And these are other things to get together, to get to that dream or result you want. Like a planting a seed that's in a good soul, in good water, in the good sun, just grow that hope to whatever is your ideal and wishes is hope.
I love that. Did everybody hear that? Could you guys all hear that? Okay, thank you. Okay, so 350.org is a great resource for all the local chapters in the world because they have presentations you can download, and you can build upon them. And so one of my favorite presentations that they have is, this is the summary slide. It's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's bad, and we can fix it. Okay, but then the question is, but how? How can we fix it? So first of all, there's a lot of graphs, but this basically shows that per capita, people in the United States use way more energy than other countries. So we can say, that China produces more greenhouse gases than we do as a country, and that's absolutely true. But China's here as far as, it's because China has more people than we do. So they might produce more, but per person, they're way less. So we're here, Russia's here, Japan's here, and then I don't, well, the EU, but it says -28, so I don't know if that's the whole EU or, but anyway, China, the world, Brazil, and India. So it's important to recognize that we living here generally just produce more greenhouse gases than people in other countries. And so I think it's pretty irresponsible. I was arguing on Facebook. I hate arguing on Facebook. But somebody was saying, oh, well, you know, China's responsible and India's responsible, and I have a 10-year-old son, and I was like, that would be like me walking into a room, and Lewis and a friend have both made a mess, but for me to tell his friend that he has to do all the cleanup because he produced more of the mess, rather than saying you guys have to clean it up together, you know? So, anyway, okay. I went to Reno a couple weekends ago. My husband had a thing, and spouses were invited, and I stayed at the Grand Sierra Resort, and I'm not a casino person, but I went there, and it just was really striking to me. So in the bathroom, there's a Save Our Planet thing on the Kleenex thing, and you know, you hang up your towels if you don't want them to wash it because it saves water. Okay, that's totally awesome. Like, hotels should do that, and they should stop putting all their shampoos in the plastic containers, and they should do all those little things. However, you walk into the casino, and it's like the epitome. This is not really representative of it. I wish I could show a video, but for those of you who are casino goers, you know, you walk in, and I mean, it is like per capita emission central. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much energy this is crazy. And then I look out over the parking lot, and it's full of, you know, carbon emitting vehicles, and so you should do the pick up your towels and save the planet that way. But I thought, you know, like, this is not gonna be enough. And then I like this one. So this top thing says, who wants to change? And everyone's raising their hands. And then the bottom one says, who wants to change? And no one raises their hand. Okay, so this says if you're against this and it has a shoreline full of plastic bottles, then you have to stop using these, which is obviously plastic water bottles and other things. But I think in order to do that, we really have to embrace how painful it is to change our lifestyle. I mean, I think I'm a pretty aware person, and I basically walk around with a lot of guilt because I don't necessarily make all the changes I know I should. Because it's easy. I don't like to think of myself as a lazy person, but maybe, you know, like sometimes it's really hard to make the decisions that we need to make. And I think that we just need to acknowledge that becoming lower on that graph, to become a citizen who is not contributing to the per capita statistic is hard. It's freaking hard. You want to go, you want to buy a backpack, you want to buy a bike helmet, you want to get a drink, you want to go somewhere. I mean, it's like we're living in this, and so it's hard, and we need to acknowledge that and start talking about it together and be okay with getting support around that. And we have to do the emotional work. You know, I think to be aware, it takes a lot of introspection and to look at why did I need to buy these new shoes? It was because I was going to this thing in Reno, and I didn't want to be the spouse that didn't look cute. And like that's like, you know, and I'm ashamed of saying it, I'm ashamed of admitting it, but why am I ashamed of having old shoes? Like, I wouldn't judge other people, but I want to have new shoes. And it's like, that's part of me as an American woman, you know, or maybe the class I'm in. I mean, this is like deep stuff. And all of these decisions happen in shoe stores and aisle 9 of, you know, Safeway. And so we have to do that while we're changing our behavior. Okay, so we have to engage in community and peer support. So I'm almost thinking of this as like an AA model. Like I took this the other day. I needed to get cranberry juice, and I took this, and I was like, So my choices are all of these plastic bottles, and plastic is just a good example to use because it's everywhere and we know that it's a huge problem. Okay, so all these plastic bottles, and then the glass bottles on top are half as much, and they're like $9 each. And it was like, what do I do? And like, honestly, because I am so concerned about it and I just fixate on it, like I wanted to be able to call somebody and be like, I'm in the aisle and I need to buy cranberry juice and there's no option and what do I do? And then maybe someone could do like, do you really need cranberry juice? Like, okay, like, could you drink less of it and buy the $8 one? You know, I don't even know what the solutions are. And so I ended up buying the plastic cranberry bottle and feeling bad about it for the rest of the day but then there also weren't a lot of other options for me to choose from. Maybe I could have gone to the cold section and bought the cardboard lemonade box, and maybe that would have made me feel better. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to make these decisions. So I almost feel like it's like a 12-step program thing. It's like, I slipped, you guys, I slipped. You know, would you tell me I'm okay and offer me support? And I think we need to do that for each other. And I also think that in AA, there's mentors and people who are modeling good behavior. And so I think if we modeled good behavior for each other and talked about our concern, putting it on Facebook and Instagram and whatever, and talking about it, that could build momentum for like group support for these changes that we need to make together. We did an event at the Auburn State Theater on September 12th, and I wanted to buy some buttons that said something like, I vote for the climate. And the wooden buttons were $8 each, and we couldn't afford that for the 340 people that came. And the plastic buttons were like 50 cents, and so I texted my two 350 friends, and I said, okay, so this is the decision. Do we buy the buttons to make a message and hurt the planet, or do we not buy the buttons? And we all decided together we would not buy the buttons. And yet we also printed, you know, posters to advertise it, to get people to be educated. So like, this is like, I know I'm just talking about cranberry juice and buttons, but this is hard, you guys. This is like, we're entrenched in our own lifestyle. We're swimming in our own water, and so we have to figure out together how to kind of get out of that. Yes?
Does it necessarily have to be every single individual that is getting us out of this, or is it also the responsibility of the companies that are forcing it into choosing between a tiny glass bottle and a huge plastic one?
You're absolutely right. And let me, I think this is hold on, let me skip. Okay, so remind me I need to go back one, but let me get to this. So we have to act on an individual level, and it's really important that we do that. But I cannot stress enough how important it is that we act on a policy level and an industry level. So you're absolutely right, and this is the thing. This is the multifaceted approach. It will not work if we require only ourselves to take action. But we all work in those companies and the government. And so you're right, it's a shared responsibility. Sometimes it's easier to act on an individual level because we have control of our own behavior, but it's not necessarily the most powerful thing that we can do. So let me finish with this, and then I'm going to go back. And how am I doing? Okay, I'm doing okay time-wise. Oh, hi.
Hi. Do you know, in Costa Rica, they're banning single-use plastic starting in 2021. Do you think that with everyone's help, that would eventually, maybe not in the whole U.S., but eventually be possible to happen in California within the near future?
It could actually happen in 2020. So there was a bill. There's actually an Assembly bill and a Senate bill, and they were supposed to vote on it. I think it was in August, and they ended up not voting on it because other things took priority. But it's set to be voted on again in January of 2020. And it's supposed to ban single-use plastics by 2030, I believe. So there's a phase-out approach, which makes sense because you do have to be reasonable. The best way to get in touch with that is you could go to the storyofstuff.org and sign up for their email list, and they'll tell you when, I'm guessing, maybe before the holiday recess of the Congress people and the state senators. But they'll be like, call your state senator, enter your zip code, this is who it is, and this is what you say. So yeah, I think they'll pass it, but our representatives need to know that we care and that we will vote them out if they don't give us what we want. So, yeah. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to work also on a political level. It really doesn't have to do with party. I mean, actually, it tends to be right now that more Democrats are willing to take action on climate change than Republicans are. But regardless of party, we need to make sure that we vote people into office. And this is like the city level, the state level, and the national level, to get people into office who believe that climate change is happening, that it's human caused, and are committed to doing something about it. The Green New Deal is awesome. I think we should go for it. The reason why I think that is because it's the best plan based on the timeline we have. But it won't even help all the way. It's only going to bring the degrees of Celsius up. It'll limit it at 2.7 degrees rather than 1.5 degrees. But still, that's at a political level. So I say, and this is my opinion, I don't know, people who support the Green New Deal also believe it, but let's do it because it's a plan that we have in place that we could put in effect in 2020 and get going on this while we work on all of the other things that happen in a wicked problem. So this means I did, my friend who was here earlier, last year we canvassed, we went door to door for candidates, and it was like the most, I've had a kid and it was scarier than that, like to go up to a door and to ask people to talk to them about who to vote for. That was like the hardest thing I've seriously ever done. But that's what I mean about getting people into office. Like this is the year, you guys, this is the year, because if you don't do it this year, we've lost that time in our window to prevent climate catastrophe. So, yes.
Going back to kind of the part about the crime rates you said over here, I think it's really important to realize that we're also voting with every purchase that we make. And
Yes.
so I know it's not about making anybody wrong, and like you said, nobody can be perfect. But if you make those choices to spend the extra few dollars to save that extra piece of plastic, and enough people do that, the stores are going to start changing the decisions that they start to buy. And so to make those choices and to realize every single dollar that you spend, you are saying, I'm doing what you're doing, or you're making a stand for something, and that vote can be even more powerful than other types of votes in our society.
You are so right.
Just being aware of what that decision is, and when I go to the store, I go, okay, do I want this piece of plastic that's going to be around for another 3 million years?
Right.
Or do I want it, what's the cost difference here? Is it really,
It's such a great point, and I can't remember where it is in this presentation, but it says we cannot consume our way to sustainability, but we can make capitalism work for us, right? Because people who don't want government involvement, and I wouldn't say it's either or, I would say it's industry and government, but people who don't want government involved would say, well, let's let the markets decide. And so you're right, our dollars can be way more powerful than government solutions. So you're totally right.
And we're going to listen to where the money is.
Right, and I've written many companies that I really like their products, and I'm like, I really, really want to keep buying your product, but I'm not going to be able to do it if you don't offer better packaging. So it's about taking those actions. A lot of times I'll do it, I'll go into a store and I'll do it right then in the car when I get out of the store while I'm thinking about it, so it doesn't end up on my list of things to do and that never gets done. Okay. Oh, so here it is. Yeah. So we can't consume our way to sustainability, but let's also make capitalism work for us. Buying local also makes a huge impact. If you think about the amount that we spend on getting goods to us, and then the plastic packaging that it comes in, and it's crazy when you think about it. So buying local will reduce your carbon footprint. Also, the fashion industry is 10% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So it's like fast fashion. And it's like, why shouldn't we show up in our older boots and know that we're valuable with or without new boots? And I'm telling on myself, so we all do it.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I just learned that all the cotton that has spandex in it is not recyclable. And who doesn't wear something with spandex?
Right. So, I mean, there's microplastics in almost everything we buy. So, and again, that goes back to your point. It's like we really need to buy from companies that are building sustainably. So, you know, we can start doing that tomorrow. Also, there's a great podcast in addition to the Pantsuit Politics that I recommended to you. It's a podcast called Mothers of Invention, and it's all about climate change. And it's actually the former Prime Minister of Ireland and an Irish comedian, and it's a really cool, unexpected mix. It's really neat. And I just listened to this like 2 weeks ago, and it's you probably have everything you need. And it talks about all the fashion industry and how we can make changes if you want more information. Oh, it's called Mothers of Invention, the podcast. Okay, so there's also organizations you can join. You can join, you know, like 350 Placer. We're basically in Auburn, but we did Placer because we want to incorporate more people. But there's 350 Sacramento, the Citizens Climate Lobby, and then the Sunrise Movement. How many people here are familiar with the Sunrise Movement? Okay, so it's all. You want to talk?
Yeah, I want to say that the Sunrise Movement in Auburn is really to people your age, and they brought a resolution to the city of Auburn to reduce their greenhouse emissions completely by 2045, I think it is, but before that, for the city of Auburn to be running on renewable energy by 2030. And the third thing is to have a climate action plan that will be reviewed every few years to get these things done. And if you would like to sign the petition to support this Auburn City Council in adopting this winter, back in November and December, you can go online to the Sunrise Movement website. Tell me more about that.
So the Sunrise, well, it's the Sunrise Movement. So you just Google it and do the Sunrise Movement, and then you can find the local chapter. I don't have the local hub's leaders email address, but that would be, and I can certainly put you in contact. So if you go to 350.org and email us, or you know, whatever, I can definitely get you that information. But the Sunrise Movement is actually it's for young people. It's basically designed for like 18 to 30-year-olds. And so it is all policy driven. So it can be a really powerful and fun place to be. So basically our goal, right, is to decrease our greenhouse gas emissions. And the main sectors and the biggest emitters is energy, right? So it's transitioning to 100% renewable energy as quickly as possible. Electricity and heat, which is a part of energy, and then transportation. So this isn't just about buying electric vehicles, it's about public transportation, walking, conserving the amount that you drive, biking, and a lot of it, again, is on a policy level, advocating for walking paths and biking paths and transit. Manufacturing, which we talked about, is like fashion. Construction. Okay, so and I'll call on you in just one moment. In Auburn, or actually it's the Placer County, and they're doing a climate action plan, or the county sustainability plan, and it's totally inadequate. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, and they're bringing it up again at a meeting relatively soon. So there's all kinds of things that you can get involved at a county level that would help decrease the greenhouse gases. And the reason why I brought that up is because most of it is around construction and building. Because it's like county planning, so it's like building permits and stuff that, you know, I don't really even know about. But so there's that as well. And then agriculture. So it's all about really reducing our meat content that we eat, and I just want to read this to you. So if the world reduced meat consumption by 15%, it would have the same impact on greenhouse gas emissions as taking 240 million cars off the road each year. For every burger skipped, you save enough water to wash your car 15 times. So, okay, and you had a question back there.
trying to create like green energy, sustainable energy, so that we can move forward. A lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I just, there's that side of it, and then I also would like to expose a lot of the opposition to that, because there's a reason why those things didn't go anywhere, why he was shut out, why we're in the place that we're in. So like, I don't know, that's just my comments.
No, that's great. And yeah, so first of all, you're absolutely right. We have the technology to fix this problem. It is not a matter of not having the technology. We have to mobilize to actually use it. And you're right. So I'll talk just for a minute about, you guys are all like obviously probably in your 20s so when I was like 8, on the cigarette boxes, they finally had the Surgeon General warning that said that smoking causes lung cancer. So that knowledge and that scientific proof that smoking causes lung cancer existed 50 years before that, and that was in about 1982 or something like that. For 50 years before, it was a scientifically proven fact that smoking caused lung cancer. And yet, the tobacco industries were incredibly successful in marketing the product and getting, the minority of experts to say, my doctor chooses Camel or whatever it is. There's a book, it's called Manufacturing Doubt, and there's also a movie that you can watch, and it talks about that. And the argument is that the oil and gas industry are doing the same thing. And so the technologies like the batteries, like the electric car, was squashed like 15 or 20 years ago because it really would have cut into oil and gas cars, like its industry. And so it is really important to acknowledge that and be aware of it. And as far as what to do with it, it's like, there's so many millions of dollars that are going into marketing doubt. So if we go back to the wicked problem things, instead of focusing our argument on arguing about whether climate change is happening and whether it's human caused, which the industries are actually causing us to focus on this part of the map, to argue about this rather than argue about what we should be arguing about, which is what we should be doing to solve it. And that's where should government be involved, should industry be involved, and people have different opinions on that, and that's okay. That's like a healthy argument. But the money that is spent creating doubt and manufacturing doubt is crazy. So I totally take your point, and it's a good one.
I was going to say about electric cars is that I think it was in like the 1910s or 20s. In New York, there were 100,000 electric cars, but they were thought of as women cars, and I think a gas company bought out the company that made them too, so they just stopped producing them after like 27 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, clearly electric vehicles are way too feminine,
Yeah. So it's like, yeah.
No, totally. You're right. I mean, we've had the technology for a long time,
like
and
100 years now. We didn't
Yeah.
have electric cars.
yeah.
They were electric.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So he was saying that the electric cars were actually available a long time ago, like in like the early 1900s, and there were like
100,000 in New York.
100,000 electric cars in New York, but they were considered for women. They were, I translated it to like being too feminine, but they were considered, so they
They were like
died.
day drivers for like just around the town. kind of
Day
thing.
drivers just around the town, so I guess, anyway, so we've had the technology for a long time. Okay. Oh, yep.
One thing about manufacturing doubt, I think it's also really important for us to realize when we look for that.
Yes.
Because it can be really unifying in the sense that we can act like people all over the world, we can mobilize, but at the same time, we're going to be fed the things that are going to support our social system. Right. And so I just think it's something that we
So she was just saying that social media, the idea of manufacturing doubt, that we need to acknowledge, and I would say address, the role that social media plays in it, because obviously social media feeds us what we already believe, and it's, as we know, a vicious
Fake news.
cycle. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, So another thing that we can do is reduce our food waste. And I want to read this to you, and there aren't too many more slides just to let you guys know. But I want to read this to you because it's really interesting. So when we waste food, we're not just wasting food. We're also wasting all the resources that went into growing it. A great report by the NRDC illustrates just how much this adds up. Food waste ends up wasting nearly a quarter of our water supply in the form of uneaten food. Over 172 billion in wasted water. Each year as a country, we spend over 220 billion growing, transporting, and processing almost 70 tons of food that ends up going to waste. If the land that we cultivate growing food that goes to waste in the US were all in one place, it would cover more than 3/4 of California. Growing food that goes to waste ends up using up 21% of our fresh water, 19% of our fertilizer, 18% of cropland, and 21% of landfill volume. This comes with a heavy carbon footprint as well. When food is disposed in a landfill, it rots and becomes a significant source of methane, a potent greenhouse gas. The global food system is responsible for up to 1/3 of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions, making it one of the largest contributors to climate change, according to the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research. The fact that we carelessly waste 40% of our food in the US and 33% globally means there is huge potential to reduce our environmental footprint. Big picture, energy and transportation tend to be the face of climate change, but with food's impact arguably larger, it definitely deserves more of a focus. And that is something that we can do individually. I mean, it is a national problem, but I think the statistic that I heard is the average household basically throws away $1,600 of food every year, of wasted food. And then if you think about it too, just the fact that there are people that are hungry, I mean, that just is another like underlying thing where I'm like, you know, it just seems really silly and stupid to me. And yet I waste food as well. Again, this is like embracing that we're all part of the problem. So, and we all are part of the solution. Okay, so waste less food. And then just the idea of reducing and reusing, and then just one second, and then recycling would be the last resort. Well, actually the last resort would be putting stuff into landfill, but that recycling is sort of, recycling isn't as strong or powerful as we think it is. And so recycling should really be our last step in that process. Fixing things instead of buying new, you know, wearing old things, doing hand-me-downs or trades. I mean, there's just so many ways we can do that. So, okay.
So I was going to add on to the food waste. I was going to say, if you have food in your pantry that you've not eaten for many months, an easy thing to do is just give it to homeless people. Like, I've started doing that. I see them, I just give them a box of crackers I know I'm not going to eat. Because then they'll eat it rather than me just throwing it away.
So, did everyone hear that? Or, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think on the last slide, I think a good one you need to put in there is refuse.
Oh, refuse. Refuse. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Refuse, reduce. I like it. Okay. Okay, so this woman is actually coming to Davis on November 5th, and she's a pretty well-known person who talks about climate change. She's somebody who is on the religious right, who would generally be thought of as somebody who would deny climate change, but she's a climate scientist. And she's pretty amazing. And she says that one of the most important things we can do is talk about it. And that is, for whatever reason in the United States, it's like, not everyone accepts it. People think, do you believe in it or not? You know, like, we need to be out there saying, this is real, this is happening, and here's what I'm doing. Again, this is about creating a community with accountability. So she says, get out of your head and into your heart. We care because it already affects each of us where we live right now. So I could say, this morning I was thinking about this on the drive here, I could say that I care about it because I don't want my family to keep being evacuated and their homes being, endangered by fire. I want a stable food supply for my son. Like right now we have a stable food supply, but the way that things are going, we're going to be fighting for food and water. And think about like just the American dream and our freedom to be able to dream big and create the life we want. Well, if we are in survival mode, I don't think that would be possible. And so like to think about why it really matters to you and start talking to people and expressing why it matters to you is really important. And it also helps with the emotional intelligence work that I was talking about and the self-awareness to really look at why is this important to you. And again, she talks about why it's political, and we already talked about that people are arguing not only about if it's a problem and what causes it, but then also the solutions. People are adamantly opposed to government involvement. People are adamantly opposed to only letting industry decide. And there has to be compromise, and there has to be a common ground. Okay, you can also calculate your carbon offset. You can just Google it, like how much carbon am I putting out, and there's tests you can take online to figure that out. And then you can also buy offsets. So if you were to fly up in a plane, you could then go to the carbonfoundation.org and buy offsets to offset. If you can't not travel, if you have to go do something, you can buy offsets. And that's basically planting. That's basically paying for trees to be planted, which again is kind of a last resort, but it's still a solution. Okay, so stay educated, informed, and engaged. So, join one of the organizations we talked about, find something that interests you. I'm passionate about presenting, but somebody else might be passionate about attending the Auburn City Council meetings. Please somebody find that exciting, because that would be really great. But, find what lights you up and then focus on it and tell people about it. Yes?
I'd like to invite everybody here to the Monday Movie Night, which is the first Monday of the month so far, and it's a brand new idea, but it's been really successful, and the movie's been great. So the first Monday, November at 4, 6:30, free, Congregational Church, and we have it every Sunday night. So, and this one that's coming up is going to continue to change.
What city is that?
Auburn, Monday, November 4th, 6:30. Find Betty for the location and the flyers. Yes.
I was just gonna say, about all of it, I've noticed, and what irritates me the most is that it's our whole lives is literally tailored to doing the wrong thing. Like how we were saying, how it's I can't afford to buy what I should, and I can't, it's I was a vegetarian for 10 years. I started when I was a little girl. I've always been very, into environmental stuff. And when I got pregnant with my first child, they really, really pushed me for my child's health. I have to start eating meat. I have to start. And, it literally made me sick to my stomach knowing that either do I have to eat meat, which I haven't eaten in 10 years since I was, 10 years old, or am I hurting my baby? And it's
Eat meat or you're a bad mom.
Exactly, and it's but it's it's not their fault. It's just the uneducated, if you're not into being an earth lover and stuff, it's people aren't educated on what's going on, and it's I always wonder, it's why isn't it part of the general education? We learn about history and earth science and English. I feel it should be normal platform ground to know about ecology and sustainability. It's why aren't you a teacher? Instead of doing presentations to this much, why aren't you in a giant lecture hall teaching a bunch of people? Because what you're saying is super important. To me, I'm okay, I gotta get into politics, I gotta be able to have that voice, because expressing this is the most important thing, It's
Yeah.
I bet a lot of us are here for extra credit, which I can admit, I came here for extra credit.
Well, we're all hypocrites. It's
I was-
okay.
right,
I'm just saying.
but then once
Yeah.
I listen to what you're saying, it's right, this is exactly what I'm looking for. If we
Yeah.
could have more of this and in larger scales, it's we could do so much more. I feel so many people just aren't educated and don't even realize what's going on.
Absolutely, and it's so frustrating, and that's why we need to talk about it, because it's that frustration for me, that frustration and anger. Sometimes I just get to where I'm I should just give up, or I should,
I feel that all the time.
And so that's why we have to have community and groups to talk
and someone
to.
to talk to, and
And
you're oh, I need that new Vans shirt that just dropped. I need that, and then I'm
Totally.
Wait,
Yeah.
I have 10.
Or
It's
to tell somebody I'm really, really freaking frustrated, and someone to be I was feeling that way yesterday, and I totally understand.
Yeah.
and then today I'm gonna do this or whatever. And so that's why this has to be, we have to talk about it, like, we have to like sing it out. And we have, so like untangling our, it's like a web. Like, you know, if you're in a web and you move, then you're stuck to other things. It's like, it's this crazy, it's a wicked situation. Yeah.
And even in one of my classes, like in my environmental science class, we were having a discussion board about like, you know, solutions on how to like lower your emissions and stuff. And like so many of us came up with good ideas, and even myself, I'm like, oh, I have to recycle more. But then in the back of my mind, I know that most of the things that we recycle don't get recycled.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, I need to, you know, start turning off the shower when I'm washing my body to save the water. But then when I'm in the shower, do I really want to turn that water off?
Right.
Like, no, not really. But
Right.
I can say that I'm going to.
Right.
It's just so hard. Everything
It's
is so
painful.
hard.
It's painful to change our lifestyles, and that's why I personally think that the only way we're going to do it is by changing the way that our community thinks about it and talks about it and supports each other in doing it, because we can't do this alone. And again, we're like fish swimming in our own water, and so like we're humans. We have flaws because we don't like to, I mean, you gave those examples, I have other examples for myself, and I like consider myself extremely passionate about this, and still I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and now I just feel guilty, so that's like making it worse. All the time. All the time. And so, yes, so to talk about what to compromise, what not to compromise, and to the other guy's point over there, it's like, we really, and the woman there, we really have to make sure that the products that are sold to us, like what if we only had glass bottle cranberry juices and then I got to choose between those? And so like, what if, you know, it has to be industry, it has to be politics, the plastic bill, the phasing out the plastic bill that's supposed to be, it's like, that's why I think that government needs to be involved in a lot of the solution, because I think we have to be forced in to making better choices. I don't think if we leave the free market to decide that we're going to be able to act in 10 years, because it's too easy for us to just not turn the water off in the shower, like we all really don't want to do, you know? So I totally take your point, and I feel you. Yeah, okay.
I think a good example of that is the plastic bag ban. You know, I don't know. I've been bringing my own bags for a billion years, but as soon as that plastic bag happened at the grocery store, suddenly you see everybody bringing their own bags because they don't want to pay that extra 10 cents or whatever per bag. It worked.
Yep.
I mean, for the most part.
Yep.
So that's how government and laws can actually help make the changes faster. Because, you know, my husband used to complain, I forgot my bags, whatever. But when it got to his pocketbook, he said, I think I'll remember my bags now.
Well, we live in a capitalist society, and a lot of our values for wonderful people and terrible people are, again, down to the bottom line of money. And so, yes, I absolutely agree that
it's nice to see.
Yeah, it is.
It can work.
And I have to say that there's the idea of a federal carbon tax, and even some of the most conservative people are in favor of it. And so how come that isn't out there? Why do we not know that there's actually like bipartisan agreement on this thing, but somehow it's being stopped? And I do think it has to do with politics and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so we all are in it together. Oh, okay.
No, not me, Thursday.
Okay.
Do you do these presentations at like high schools or middle schools or anything like that?
We're open for business. This is the first one like this that we've done. We do other presentations, and we basically have it out there, and all people have to do is contact us, and we'll book it. So yes, we do, but we aren't yet quite organized enough to advertise it and to go out proactively to let people know, and we're working on that. So if you know of any other classrooms, schools, or anything that would want us to come and talk, we're totally open. Yeah.
I think you should start in kindergarten.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my son and I my son just gave a presentation by himself. He's in the 4th grade, so it's my little part.
Awesome.
What's up?
I said awesome.
Oh, cool. Did you have a question? Or? Okay. Okay, so then the other thing is transitioning from to long-term thinking from short-term thinking. So a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. And I just think that's beautiful. So to me, I get to a point where I'm like, oh my God, this feels so overwhelming. I just do need to be that ostrich and just put my head in the sand for a little while. So I love this quote by the Dalai Lama that says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. So when we get overwhelmed, I think one of the best things we can do is spend time in nature, because our planet is beautiful, and it's our lifestyle or our species really that we're trying to save, but also we are trying to save the planet. And it is beautiful, and there's so much psychological research that says spending time in nature is really, really beneficial on all levels. And I also think self-care is important. And I'm probably running out of time here. Okay. Also, if we focus on what we do want rather than what we don't want, I think it's really important. So like, what if what we're building all together is clean air, clean water, more connected to communities? If we jump out of our consumer behaviors, we might connect with each other at a deeper level as human beings. So to really start visioning what we're working towards rather than what we're trying to avoid, I think that can help when you feel overwhelmed as well. Okay, so I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but there's the butterfly effect, and it's a part of chaos theory. And the idea is have you guys heard of it? How many of you have heard of it? Yeah. Okay, so the idea is that a butterfly can be flapping her wings in Brazil and create a hurricane all across the globe. But I think that it can also work in positive ways, that we really have to believe that what we do matters. Like, I have to go home saying, you know what, for today, I drove here in a gas-guzzling old ranch truck because my truck broke down, but I did my best, and I trust that the ripple that I made today is going to make a difference. And we all have to do that for ourselves, for the decisions that we make in aisle 9, for the calls that we make to our Congress people, to the, for everything we do. We just have to believe that it is going to make a difference. And I think that brings it back to hope. It's like, I believe that we all matter and that our actions truly affect the world. And you know what? I hope that I'm right. And I think that that's where it is. So,
how many of you think she's right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
There you go.
I read this amazing book, audiobook with my 10-year-old son. It's called Esperanza Rising, and it's about this Mexican family that was forced to immigrate to the United States in the 1930s. And not only did it teach me a lot about the history of the way that Mexicans have been treated for longer than I understood. So that's like a whole different topic, but it's a beautiful book. But the bottom line, Esperanza means hope in Spanish, for those of you who didn't know. And the bottom line is that the family came to the United States, and they were very wealthy in Mexico, and then they came here and they were field workers. But the adults who moved here, the action that they took was for the future, and they had hope that what they were going to do was going to be to pay off. And Esperanza's Rising, they're like, and Esperanza means hope, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm creating that presentation right now. So hope is rising, and I think it's really important to understand that. And then again, this quote from Nelson Mandela that says, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. And then hope is an action. This is the last slide. This is from 350.org. And the banner says, to change everything, it takes everyone. So I'll just conclude this by saying that it's really up to all of us. We have to talk about it. We have to come together, and we have to work on solutions wherever we're passionate. Plant your actions, plant your heart, and do everything that you can. So, does anybody have any follow-up questions? Okay, no, that's okay. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you all very, very much. Don't forget to populate our tree with your hopes. And she's right. I actually don't think everybody has to be a part of the solution. There's most of us, right? So that's a very important component. You're the answer to your own future. Thank you again for coming. Don't forget to buy something. We just cost the cafe here a couple $100 of lost revenue. But don't pick the plastic pomegranate juice.